Coming up on Mountain News this morning, we continue to see acts of kindness as fellow Eastern Kentuckians take care of their communities that have been through so much. And state leaders come together to help the Commonwealth make a comeback as we continue to battle against a drug epidemic.
Dedicated to Eastern and Southern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News this morning.
It's Tuesday and it's 6 o'clock. And I'm Dakota Makris. Let's just throw all the ands in there. Good morning to you. Let's take it over to Brandon for a look at our forecast. And Brandon, I was telling you during the break that when I woke up this morning, I looked over at my cat Winona, all warm and snuggly, and I just looked at her. I was like, you know what? I go to work for you every morning so you can get fed.
That's right.
You know, got to buy your food.
Got to take care of your children.
Exactly. And I think I do quite a good job at that.
That's exactly right. All right, let's take care of you and the weather forecast this morning as we take a look at some of the conditions across the region. I-75 at Corbin, a little bit dark there this morning. That light on that banner there, not on this morning, but some traffic moving the opposite direction. 42, a cold start to the day down there. Now 39 in Clintwood. They're joining Jonesville in the 30-degree club. Still 50 in Prestonsburg. A lot of folks there on the ridges in the upper 40s. Most folks in the low to mid 40s. So cold and getting colder. How much colder? 13 degrees colder in Moorhead this morning, 11 in Hazard, 12 in Harlan, and 10 in Middlesboro. A lot of other folks close to those double digits as well. So grab some coffee, a little extra to max warmer needed depending on your chill preference, and grab a warm donut this morning as you head out the door too. Next dozen hours, lots of sunshine, but temperatures don't climb as much as they did yesterday. Only 60s today for daytime highs. Dakota?
All right, Brendan, thank you. Well, FEMA has been on the ground in Eastern Kentucky for nearly 2 months now. There are still flood victims waiting for help. Western Kentucky tornado victims know how difficult it can be to get help fast. Kristen Kennedy investigates FEMA's response in Western Kentucky and how vastly different it is to the work in our region.
Okay.
Rebuilding homes and businesses in Eastern Kentucky is slow but steady work.
4 feet out of the water.
We listened to stories of survival.
FEMA came and looked at it.
And of sadness.
And they only offered $176.
When FEMA's first checks came in.
I figure if money's not coming in, I don't know what we're going to do.
Very grateful for them. I just wish that they, would come through a little faster because it is trying.
For some, the money was much less than expected, not nearly enough to rebuild a home.
People's lost everything they've got, and they go over and they're getting turned down, or $500 or $178. I mean, it's just a slap in the face, and I do hope they get it changed.
I hope they can see that this is something that never happened before, and people is not out just for the money. They out to get a place to live.
FEMA workers continue to say the financial aid is coming in an even larger amount than what we saw in Western Kentucky. The organization approved aid for about 6,500 people in the first month after the devastation. That's almost triple the number of households that received money from FEMA after the tornadoes in Western Kentucky.
It's geography, it's the infrastructure that's there, and their support element that sometimes FEMA's, the requirements are not as great as they are from one disaster to the other. And that's why it's very difficult, and it's sometimes appears to be slow, is because we're meeting the survivors where they are and trying to fit our programs and other federal agencies' programs into helping them jumpstart their recovery.
FEMA worker Brett Howard says the organization pays out when other avenues for reimbursement, like homeowners insurance, don't.
Western Kentucky was a wind event, Eastern Kentucky a flooding event. Usually what you find, and what we found true to be in Western Kentucky, is the majority of the homeowners were insured for wind-related damages. And there was a lot of insurance in Western Kentucky, as opposed to Eastern Kentucky, where you have a flood event, and flood insurance is never covered on a homeowner's insurance policy. So there's not a lot of insurance. So you see a large discrepancy in the numbers.
We're also seeing a large discrepancy in the number of homeowners who withdrew applications. In Western Kentucky, 44% of claims were withdrawn, duplicates, or did not respond to FEMA's follow-ups with their initial applications.
In Western Kentucky, their insurance covered their needs. It met their needs, so they didn't have anything for FEMA or another federal agency to assist them with, and they withdrew. We find quite often, more than we would like, that when we get to homeowner or survivor to perform our home assessment, our inspection of the home and the damages, we're being told that I never called you. Why are you here? And so we run into that more than we would like.
35% of claims in Western Kentucky were denied because they were in undesignated counties or because FEMA workers referred them somewhere else. Those other places where they may be getting help include federal, state, and local organizations. FEMA partners with the Small Business Administration, the USDA, and HUD to help victims.
Would you say that FEMA is still in its early stages of providing help?
Yes, ma'am. The 30 days in, we have over $99.7 million in the hands of survivors as the federal government. That includes what FEMA has paid out and also SBA. So in 30 days, almost $100 million. That's incredible. And we're just now getting started.
Claims are still being evaluated out of Eastern Kentucky, and people are still appealing initial decisions, continuing to rebuild. Kristen Kennedy, WKYT.
Well, the final numbers are slow to come in from Eastern Kentucky right now. The deadline for flood victims in 13 counties to apply for individual assistance from FEMA was also extended 1 month, and that's now October 28th. Eastern Kentucky native Kate Clemens has been feeding flood survivors in Hindman every day since the high water in late July. Each day, a new local sponsor teams up with her to feed victims. Knott County Judge Executive Jeff Dobson says it is Clemens and others' actions that keep the community moving.
Without her neighbors, her community members pulling together, doing what they have done for people of Knott County and of Eastern Kentucky, they have opened roads. They have been in there helping people.
Well, Clemens says she needs more donors to help fund around 1,000 meals per day, and she plans to continue as long as needed. People lined up at the Perry County Library yesterday to donate blood. The Kentucky Blood Center held a blood drive inviting anyone from the community to donate. Phlebotomist Kyle Porter says they stepped up after the flood to donate more, but the need is still there since the entire Commonwealth is facing a blood shortage.
You never know when it's going to be your day when you may need blood. Whenever you're in a car wreck, you have an accident, you may need emergency surgeries or something. But you could always use the blood. Someone else out there can use it. So we don't have enough right now.
Well, if you didn't make it yesterday, the Kentucky Blood Center will be at Highlands ARH today from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Substance abuse and unemployment are topics that many Eastern Kentucky communities deal with, but one organization is working to impact the state's approach to substance abuse recovery, criminal justice reform, and other issues surrounding drug abuse and employment. Our Alyssa Williams was at one of the Kentucky Chamber's Kentucky Comeback Tour stops to learn more.
Clay County officials, state representatives, and business leaders gathered at EKU's Manchester campus to learn how they can help Kentucky make a comeback.
This is actually one of our last stops on the Kentucky Comeback Tour. This is an initiative through the Kentucky Chamber, really looking at the impact that substance use disorder has throughout Kentucky.
Meetings like this give communities a chance to create a dialogue surrounding substance abuse, second chance employment, and other topics.
One of the main goals of the Comeback Tour is to really hear from Kentuckians on what they think needs to happen with resources to substance use disorder, how it's impacting the workforce, is there enough resources in terms of police officers and law enforcement and social workers, is there enough treatment facilities available?
Those with the Kentucky Chamber say they use the data collected from these meetings to see how they can help fill those gaps.
We also deal very heavily in the policy work and making sure that our lawmakers in Frankfort and in Washington, D.C. are listening to the feedback that we've gotten on this tour, working with them on policy solutions to really help curb some of these numbers.
And for Manchester officials, they say they're happy this area is getting the help it needs to help people get back to work.
It's a worldwide problem. It just ain't Manchester or Clay County or state of Kentucky. And I mean, people's got to be willing to help these people and go do what they need to do.
Helping Kentucky make a comeback, one meeting at a time. In Manchester, Alyssa Williams, WYMT Mountain News.
Well, Kentucky Chamber of Commerce President and CEO Ashley Watts says although this Kentucky tour has come to a close, the Chamber has 2 full-time staff members committed to equal opportunity employment that will help to continue this mission. It appears even less likely that there will be a U.S. Senate debate in Kentucky this year. KET's Public Affairs Unit says Republican Senator Rand Paul's campaign did not respond to its invitation for an appearance on the same program as Democratic challenger Charles Booker. KET invited the two to be on its Kentucky Tonight program with Renee Shaw. No other debates are known to be set between the two, so it could be the first U.S. Senate race since the 1990s where there's no televised joint appearance to allow voters to compare the candidates answering questions.
Almost 11 here on this Tuesday morning. We continue to watch again the possibility for some cold air this morning, and all eyes on the south again as we watch the possible impacts of Hurricane Ian make their way toward us here in the mountains. Let's take a look at our camera on top of Pine Mountain. Pretty quiet this morning, no major issues up there. So again, just a chilly start to the day, probably chilly in some of the lower elevations more so than the higher elevations because heat actually rises in situations like this. 39 in Clintwood and Jonesville though, and you see 50 in Prestonsburg, a lot of low to mid 40s out there this morning. So we're continuing to watch that across our region. Heading up to about 66 later this afternoon. It's going to be a chilly day though. Could be some breezy conditions out there as well. So again, keep those jackets handy just in case. Dakota?
All right, Brendan, thank you so much. Well, coming up here on Mountain News this morning, Florida braces for the impact of Hurricane Ian as it rapidly strengthens into a major storm. Stay with us.